I am pleased to introduce Vincent. Vincent has been a passionate aviator since high school, where he learned how to fly, taking lessons. I'm sure he'll fill us in a little bit more. He's also the founder and CEO of Private Air Media Group. His education background is both in journalism and marketing,
yes,
which accounts for Aviation Media Group. Okay, he spent time in the Navy and 27 years in radio and television broadcasting, and then holding executive positions with the National Business Aviation Association, the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, and the Bob Hoover Legacy Foundation. Now he is on the board of the Greater Washington Business Aviation Association and Angel Flight West, which I'd love to hear more about. What brought me to discover, I guess, Vincent, is he does a podcast called All Things Aviation and Aerospace, and I was listening to a podcast on women nurses in the Tuskegee
during that era, yeah.
During that time. It was very, very engaging. There was another one on a woman who ran at that time, or subsequently, I guess, the airport operations in Miami. So
Atlanta.
And Atlanta.
Yeah, she headed up both.
Yeah, the podcasts are very interesting, so make sure you take a look at or listen to some of those. Anyway, Vincent will fill in some more, and we'll go on with our topic of the day.
Cool. I prefer to stand when I do these things.
Okay.
You guys don't mind. Plus, you might be head sitting here, you wouldn't be able to see half the screen. It's a pleasure to be here today and talk with you guys and kind of give you a few updates. I have been in the industry a long time, as you heard, first broadcasting. But the flying, I took my first flying lesson at Lambert St. International Airport, which back then was GA friendly, you could say. It's in the 70s. So, in a Cessna 150. And, the rest is history, as they say. I wanted to be a naval aviator, but my glasses wouldn't let that happen. So it was like, you can be a navigator. And I was like, no, if I'm sitting in the back and I can control the aircraft, no thanks, don't want to ride along. So I passed on that and ended up the oxymoron Navy intelligence. So
David Levent or David
Levent. I thought I had turned this on.
No problem. And so aviation's always been a part of my life. But I kind of stumbled into the advocacy side of it about coming up on 20 years now. First with AOPA and then NBAA. My involvement with both associations was primarily what the associations do, and that's advocate for our industry, government, operations, international ops, etc. Cover the gambit in both. One's on the GA side mostly, AOPA, and then NBAA on the business aviation side. So I do sit on a couple of boards. I sit on GWBAA, and we've had our annual open house here. We just had a successful one back in April of this year. We are having it again next year, also in April, earlier in April, at Atlantic Aviation again. They were very hospitable to us, and it worked out really good. We had a really good turnout. We had almost 200 people. We had about 20 exhibitors, and we had 15 aircraft on static. We had smaller ones inside the hangar, and we had some big boys outside. Interesting enough, Bombardier was our biggest, Bombardier and Gulfstream, but Bombardier got a lead that ended up working out for them from the open house. So that's always good to hear. That means they'll probably be back next year. But it was good. It was a really good event. So appreciate that. I said all that to say that I'm very immersed in aviation here in this region, the DMV, know it really well. So, you know, and you were asking about Angel Flight West, because it's out west and how that came about. Well, the guy that was the executive director of it, he and I have been friends for a number of years, and I used to live in California and fly up from, as I like to say, from Tijuana to Canada. So I'm real familiar with that region as far as airspace is concerned. And with my background in media and everything, they wanted somebody to help them in that area. So they asked me to join the board, and I obliged. So got the West Coast board and the East Coast board. So you can imagine I keep a little busy. So, she mentioned about my show, my podcast. I'm in my 5th year of doing it. The whole purpose for me first of all, I came up with it when I was the executive director of the Bob Hoover Legacy Foundation. And my whole reason for even doing it is because I've noticed that over the years that a lot of young people aren't familiar with our industry. They know about being a pilot, they know about being a mechanic, they may even know about being an engineer, but they don't know about any other aspects of it. They don't realize that we have a ton of other opportunities in the industry if you just want to be in aviation. And I keep having these conversations with people even now where they say, gosh, you know, in fact, I was at Vaughn College up in New York, and they actually did a show up there that'll be posted in a few weeks. And one of the students was one of those who discovered Vaughn College by accident and then started going there, and then make a long story very short. He was walking by the UAV, the Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Lab, and he saw these unmanned aerial vehicles, these UAVs in there, and stuck his head in and he said, "What are you guys doing?" And they told him. And next thing you know, he signs up for a class. Now he's vice president of the club for UAVs at Vaughn. He's totally into it. They're preparing for a competition coming up next year, and that type of thing. And that's common, as you guys probably all know. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here, but it's a common thing that these young people do not know about the opportunity. Adults don't know about what's going on in our industry. You know, how many people ask me what airline I fly for, but and I've never even come close to that. But anyhow, so I came up with a show, and that's what I do with it. I talk about opportunities. I get guests from all over. I've had iconic people like Clay Lacey, Tammy Jo Schultz, etc. And then I've had folks from NASA and the whole nine. And I just try to let them know that whatever your skill set is, whatever your interest is, it applies. You know, I was doing an intern thing for NASA's internship program, and a young lady on it I asked them, I always ask them to give me a couple of students or people that are currently in the program. And they gave me this one young lady, and she said she was studying business, and I paused for a second. I was like, okay, that makes sense. NASA has a lot of contracts. They need somebody that has that kind of expertise. And there you go. So she's working for NASA. She finished the internship and got hired, and that's what she does. She works on their stuff for contracts and projects that require a business mindset or financial mindset, if you will, and that type of thing. So anyhow, long-winded answer to a very short question, but thought I'd give you guys a little bit of background on what I do. So, and I wanted to kind of preface this with, I am up to speed on a lot of things. A couple of weeks ago, I went to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Aerospace Summit. I also went to the JetNet IQ Summit. JetNet IQ is more on the business aviation side, updating about everything going on in the industry. And on the other side, aerospace, doing the same thing. Both summits had one thing in common that I thought was interesting, and I keep hearing it over and over. That's workforce development. Workforce is a big deal right now. It is a big challenge. I think everybody knows we need pilots, we need mechanics, we need air traffic controllers, and the beat goes on. So it is a subject, and it has one thing that I think is really challenging. I'm stating all this because that's normally a lot of what I talk about is things related to workforce development and career. But one of the biggest challenges of workforce development is that they need them now, but they also need them down the road. And so how do you balance that from a effort standpoint, from a budgetary standpoint, et cetera? So that's one of the things that they're trying to deal with. Okay, let me move.
You don't mind, just a quick question?
Sure.
You talk about all the opportunities, sort of job opportunities. I'm just curious, are there investment opportunities?
Yes, there are
That you
actually.
see in your space that are being unfilled?
Yes, there are. There are huge investment opportunities because the industry is expanding. FBOs are making acquisitions and expanding their footprint and things like that in other areas. So yeah, it's wide open. I think, and there's ways to, vet that out and see what the opportunities are. But absolutely. Ways as in getting on some committees that I can recommend.
If I may, pay attention to what's going to be happening at the airport for the next umpteen years. Marriott's going away. They're going to put a convention hotel in. And you've got the cargo opportunity because they want to bring cargo in now. There's just a lot of happening for possibilities of investment and the growth of the airport itself.
Did they change their assessment on cargo?
Yep.
They did, okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of committees. Okay, so first part is AI. And I'm going to talk about 4 different areas, including robotics and drones, and my favorite, what do you want to call it, advanced air mobility or urban air mobility, but pretty much the same stuff as eVTOL. I have 3 daughters. So I raised 3 daughters. I'll make the story shorter than I planned since I've been expanding my conversation. I've raised 3 daughters. They've been flying with me since they were little. Used to put 3 of them in the back of the plane. The short story part of that story is I would, after we loaded up and everything, locked it down, open up my cockpit window, yell clear, pause, fire her up. Fast forward, kids are like 5th grade or maybe 6th grade or whatever. We go on a trip. This time, one of my daughters rides in co-pilot with me instead of in the back, which my wife is fine with, by the way. And she's paying attention this time. So what she notices, she sees me put my hand over on the left side of the cockpit and turn on my master switch, and then put my hand on the ignition, the keys. That was the first time it occurred to her, which then she shared with her sisters, that I wasn't starting the airplane by saying clear. That I would say clear, and then she saw my hand turn. She said, "Oh," it was hilarious. But I bring it up this to kind of kick things off because that's how technology has rolled. I mean, we now have voice activation in cockpits. It's not, you don't start the engines with voice activation, not yet anyhow, but you do a lot of other things with it. And that's what I wanted to kind of share with you. So the same stuff that you have with Alexa and Siri and that type of thing, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but Garmin has what they call intelligence, and it is voice activation. And so there are things you can do with these Garmin units, the 650, 750, and the 350 and 335, that you can do to put in frequencies and things like that just by telling it. Now you have to give the command a certain way, and the thing that's funny to me about voice activation is sometimes you can say something and you didn't want it to respond, and it does anyhow. And you're like, no, I wasn't telling you that. So that gets kind of interesting anyhow. But yeah, it's very intuitive, and they're expanding it, and we'll see more of it. So these are a couple of cockpits here, and then the other part of the voice activation stuff now is in cabin management systems. So The passengers can actually make things happen in the cabin, such as lowering or raising or lowering the temperature, or dimming the lights, or pulling the shades, and things like that, depending on the aircraft that they have and that type of thing. So this is all in reference to artificial intelligence, because all of these things, in terms of, these are some of the examples of companies that have various stages of voice activated cockpits. Europe has an interesting thing called Clean Sky 2, and their voice activation in the cockpit is more to help with reducing emissions and noise levels by giving commands in the cockpit that will make adjustments that will either bring the throttle back a bit and things of that nature. And then some of the other ones, of course, Airbus is in there. One of the cabin systems, Lufthansa, and then here back home, Collins Aerospace has a voice control cabin management system. So just to give you an idea of it. The other thing, anybody familiar with Autoland? This is out there quite a bit now, but it's still growing. So Garmin came up with an automatic landing system that if the pilot gets incapacitated, push a button, hands off, it will do everything else, including talk to the passengers.
Wow.
Wow.
So it will,
Who pushes the button?
whoever else is in the plane, or if the pilot's by themselves, hopefully they push it before they knock out.
Okay.
Because it is designed, if somebody has a heart attack or some other incapacitation, then a passenger just, and that's the part of the briefing, you tell the passenger, hey, if anything happens to me, hit that button.
This is killing the plot line of a lot of movies.
But you know what's really cool about it is it talks to the passengers, it locates the best airport to land at, and it lands a friggin' airplane better than I can. And I'm just like, really? It's really thorough. And they started out with it in the Cessna Skyhawk 172. It is now in, let's see if I can put it up. Yeah, there we go. So it's now in all these aircraft. It's even in the Citation jet. It's in the Gen 3. It's in all of the King Airs with retrofits. It's in the Cirrus Vision Jet and their SR-22 G7, which is their newest 22. The TBM 940 and 960, the Piper 600 and 700, and the Honda Elite 2. All of those have that auto land system in it. All of them have the ability for you to push the button. It also talks to the control tower. So it will identify itself. It will tell the control tower it's declaring an emergency and that it is a computer that is talking to them, and go from there.
So if there are several airports before your final destination where you go and you get incapacitated, is it going to take you to the nearest airport?
It will take you to the nearest unless it's not safe.
Okay.
So if you're in mountainous terrain, or if that airport is souped in with weather and another airport is clear but a little further away, it'll make that decision because it's getting input from your whatever weather you're using, whether it's XM or whatever you're using on the aircraft. It takes all of that in. The one thing that I don't think it does, I don't think it can fully interpret what a controller may be telling it other than the basic things like, cleared for such and such runway or make such and such approach. So I haven't flown with it yet in operation, so that one I don't know. But you made me think about that. So I'm going to find out.
Is it interactive? So will someone say, oh, by the way, this is what you do for that person having the emergency, like CPR?
No. It's only worried about getting the plane down safely.
Right.
The only interaction with the passengers is it will calm them down to say, I have control of the plane. Please make sure your seatbelt's fastened, and then hang on.
When it makes a decision to land, does it also look at the fuel consumption?
It does. It looks at everything anything that's plugged into it, it can look at. So
Does the controller clear out the other air traffic to give this?
Absolutely. Once it declares an emergency, they'll do what they normally do.
700 and
Squawks, it'll do that. It'll squawk 7,700. It'll do everything automatically.
And do they have the equivalent of this on the Boeing Dreamliner in case the guy up front has
They
a
got two
problem?
pilots.
Yeah, they got auto land on those too. A little different level, but yeah, actually they do.
But they do have that same thing?
They have not this system,
Well,
but
no, but they have an automatic
They have
landing.
automatic landing
They do?
system, yeah.
They do.
The Airbus, and I believe Boeing has them too. I know Airbus for sure because I was on a flight one time and I always compliment the pilots on the way out and say, hey, that was a great landing. And they greased one at DCA, which is really hard to do because it's such a short, usually you come in pretty firm and hit those brakes right away. And this plane greased on, and I told the pilot, I said, hey man, that was a great landing. He knew I was a pilot, so he waved me over. He said, wasn't me. I said, oh, you're co-pilot? I said, oh, you're autopilot? Yeah. The autopilot systems in those aircraft can take it all the way down to the ground and land it sometimes better than we can.
For all these other things, not that specifically, but calling it AI,
Yes.
normally when we use an AI, it's going up to a server somewhere, cloud, whatever, where the supercomputers are, and then coming back with the information. I'm assuming this code is all self-contained. I mean, they're not communicating with satellites.
No,
Right,
it's within. It's self-contained.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It does communicate the things such as weather or other information with.
well, it's getting
satellites.
inputs, but all the
It's getting
processing
inputs,
is
but the
code
processing
that's
is local.
on
Yeah.
site. Yeah.
Well, the processing now is, look at our phone and how much you can do just within that little unit. So yeah, it's pretty easy. So let me get back on track here. So I thought I'd touch base on a couple of things. Artificial intelligence is not exactly new. The only thing new about it is the technology is so advanced now of just what we were talking about that instead of it being an IBM computer this tall, it's all self-contained in a much smaller unit. But AI has actually been around since the 50s. And so there's been some version of it that has been in play, a lot of it military and NASA oriented, but still there. And then it's only been in the last decade that AI has really jumped leaps and bounds in terms of the speed of processing the whole nine. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to talk about its applications in the industry, advantages and challenges. I'm going to do the same thing with drones, the same thing with robotics. And then, you see I gave it a whole page because it's my favorite thing. Air taxis, they're right around the corner. And it's going to be an Uber situation where you can actually Uber your air taxi and go jump in and go cut across town in 10 or 15 minutes instead of 2 hours like some people had to do today. And I'll talk about all the factors with that. So, I didn't want to sound too whatever, but elementary, I guess I'm trying to say. But the definition of AI is basically machines that mimic intelligence. And that's an important point, at least it is from my perspective, because it's mimicking human intelligence. It is not human intelligence. And that can come into play in a lot of different ways, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But the big advantages of it, and there's a lot of tug of war with AI right now. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it making people lose their job? And all of that. And that really depends on the circumstance. But it is transformative. It's here. It's coming in full speed, and it's here to stay. And it's only going to get more involved in everything that we do as we move forward. It's obviously very fast. You guys have heard of Waymo, the cars that self-drive? Well, so I go to LA like every other month, and every time I'm out there, I come across them. They're all over the place. They're up in San Francisco. They're getting ready to come to DC. And the one thing that I always used to say, and now I have to kind of shut my mouth, I was like, you can't mix technology with people driving. The two don't mix really well because people make their own decisions, speed, follow too closely, jump in and out of lanes. Well, this whammo is such a smart little thing that it actually, what it does, it took a minute to figure this out, it does what you're supposed to do when you drive, such as proper distance based on speed from the vehicle in front of you and things like that. So it, you know, if a car in front of it suddenly stops, it's not like, oh, I gotta slam on the brakes because no, I'm at the proper distance. I just have to slow down, you know, and things like that. And the 360-degree factor with it, it's pretty good about like maneuvering around the situation and all of that kind of stuff. So it's actually a safer driver as a machine than we are as humans.
Except I heard on the news this morning,
One crash.
one did an illegal U-turn and got pulled over by the police. Because there was nobody in it, they couldn't issue a ticket. They did have to report it though.
Well, they're on camera anyhow because it's got cameras all around it.
I just thought it
Yeah,
was
but
something
that's
interesting.
hilarious.
You were saying it does what it's supposed to, except for that it did an illegal U-turn.
Well, but that brings up a point that I was going to be talking about, and that is that's one of the drawbacks with AI. It has no reasoning ability. All it does is what it's supposed to and what it's programmed to, and what it learns on its own up to a point. But it has no reasoning ability. So, yeah, it doesn't know that you're not supposed to make a U-turn. That's not programmed. They probably are going to now. They're probably going to look, we need to make sure this thing knows about no U-turns, you know. But it doesn't have that. So, a little sidebar. So, I thought I was telling my wife something interesting when I told her that I was teasing a whammo. And she's like, what do you mean? I was like, oh, I was just seeing what it would do if I, you know, pressed it a little bit. Maybe that's the pilot in me, I don't know. And she said, you know that thing has cameras all the way around it. And you know if you do anything wrong, it's going to have you on camera. And I was like, leave it to you to think of that. I didn't really care. I just was having some fun. But anyhow, I digress. So, you know, the speed, the multitasking capability, except U-turns, you know, and then the big part, one of the big pieces is, you know, it allows for being proactive and offers a predictive process. So it's way ahead of the game, you know, in flying, they tell us fly ahead of the plane. The faster the plane, the more ahead of it you have to be. And it's, whether people are ready for it or not, it's a tremendous resource. Yes, applications for it. So it's being applied a lot right now in aviation, both in the airport operations side and on flight operations. On flight operations, it's helping with scheduling efficiency and routing and things like that, because it can read a bunch of situations at once and then make suggestions for a decision as to a go or no go or a change or things like that. It has predictive analytics that are available now. Business aviation is using that a lot. And basically, actually so is commercial aviation. And basically meaning that it can, if the things that we normally have to track manually, tire wear, other things that are required from a maintenance standpoint, it will do it and it'll flag it for you and say, hey, you haven't changed those tires since, you know, 3 weeks ago or whatever. You may want to, maybe time to go ahead and change them now rather than wait until you're starting to see the need for it when they're inspected. Early detection of problem areas again, and then so I said increased reliability. It's increased reliability and reduction of downtime, meaning that basically if it is on top of things and therefore you're on top of things, then there's less problems of something breaking down or something going wrong, and things of that nature.
You may have a slide on this later, but for security, if we're going in the direction, obviously everything's automated, then the next question is, well, okay, what happens when China and Russia hack into everybody's cars and
Are you talking about cybersecurity?
slam on the brakes at the same time?
That's almost an entire another conversation, but I am going to touch on it a little bit. As the challenges you brought up, reasoning in real world scenarios, that's a big challenge. So, couple examples that I can give in that regard. One in particular I wanted to share with you. So I was on a Delta flight coming back from Oshkosh from what's the airport over there? Starts with an A, I can't think of it. On Delta, there was something weather or something major that happened that totally upset the entire scope of things. And I was trying, it rebooked me automatically on my reservation and on my app. It sent me a notice saying you've been rebooked. But when I looked at it, I was like, an 8-hour layover in Detroit? No. Why? Well, the AI and the algorithm was saying that the rule of Delta is that you can only go back to the airport go to the airport that you're designated in your reservation. You cannot. We live in the DMV. We have 3 choices. It wasn't seeing that. So I looked it up and I was like, oh, it's a flight. It's a better connection this way. They just need to fly me into it was either DCA or Dallas, I can't remember. So I called them and I said, hey, can you help me? Because it doesn't make any sense for me to go sit in Detroit for 8 hours. And she goes, oh yeah, sometimes the system doesn't see that, blah, blah, blah. Very nice about it. Rebooked me because it was their error, not their error, their problem anyhow because of the massive delays that they had. And I got rebooked, but the AI didn't do that. It still took a person to make that change because the algorithm wasn't showing that. Goes back to the no U-turn factor. And I think that is a really good example of how AI can be great and very helpful, but it can also steer you down the wrong road, so to speak, because it can't read a situation. The other thing I had happen with me was on a United, I wanted another change. This one was also in reference to a delay, but not as bad, and I wanted to make the change. It wouldn't let me do it on the app. When I got to the airport, I went to the counter, because I'm thinking, okay, I go to the customer service agent, and they're going to help me. They say, oh, you need to call our reservation people. I'm like, but you're here. He's like, yeah, but the system doesn't allow us to change it. It's like, doesn't make any sense, but okay. I almost did can I speak to a supervisor, but he was very nice about it, and I was like, okay, fine. So then I go and I jump on the phone and I call the agent, and guess what they tell me?
Yeah, do it through the app.
They can't help me either.
Go to the counter.
And I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm at the airport. I was just at your counter. Your counter can't help me and you can't help me? No, we don't have control of that on our system. I'm like, well, who does? The system. So I had to live with it. Ended up staying at that airport for 3 hours or whatever. But I had to live with it because I didn't have a choice. That's, to me, a challenge. As modern and as great as AI can be, that can be really, really difficult. So you guys know about all this stuff. I just thought I'd bring it up, but it's because it's taking over. I have TSA Pre, which I've had for a long time. I have Clear, which I've also had for quite a while. And now I'm in Clear Plus. And so when I walk in, they scan my eyes, thing pops up, I go right through. I literally never take more than, unless it's a busy day, more than 5 minutes to go through. And that's all with the biometrics and the whole nine. And now they got this new system which is what I wanted to mention about, and you may have heard about on the news, where you're going to be able to walk through with your bag. It does a biometric scan, and you keep right on going. You don't put it through a machine. You don't pull out a wallet or your phone. It just scans you, confirms you, and passes you through. They're getting ready to test that in Atlanta and one other city, I think New York.
Are you saying that they're not going to scan or check the luggage at all?
It's part, you carry it with you. I think it scans when you go through this thing, but I think it's pretty much clear on you.
It's like Total Recall when the guy walks through the screen, they just sort of see everything as you walk. And
Yeah, well, I hope it's not quite like that, but a possibility. And the other thing is, I don't know if you guys are aware of again, this is newer technology, but most flight attendants can see where you're supposed to be sitting on the plane now. And so if you go, because they're selling these seats like Economy Plus and Exit Row and all that kind of stuff, if you go sit in one of those and you're not assigned it, somebody will come and tell you, well, that's not your assigned seat, I need you to go to your assigned seat. Now there's two reasons for that. One is that they're controlling that so that they can continue to make money. But the other reason is that now most of them are contacting us regarding purchasing something. And they do it to you through your seat. So if you're sitting in your assigned seat, they just punch in your assigned seat number and charge you whatever it is you bought. So, news? Breaking news? Good, that's the whole goal. Drones. So unmanned aerial systems are really coming into play in a lot of ways. Some examples: medical deliveries, and of course, other deliveries, and of course, for military and that type of thing. Advantages to drones: contribute to improvement of airport operations. And one of the big ways it does that, for example, is that it can inspect areas of the airport using the drone instead of having to send somebody out, and then show you what that problem is, and you can deal with it. I'd say wildlife. Birds there are other wildlife too, but birds are a big problem still at airports. And so drones can help monitor that, figure out where they're convening and things like that, and help you address that problem. And just any other aspect of airport operations, including emergency response. If something's going on, you got a drone up there with a camera, it can kind of give you the scenario, and then the folks with the emergency vehicles, et cetera, can handle that.
With birds, do you do anything active to literally remove them, or
Well,
it's just observational? Okay, the birds are there, let's wait 5 minutes until they clear?
No, well, it depends on the airport, and it depends on how bad the bird situation is. Some airports actually have devices to scare the birds away, that they'll do that before an aircraft takes off and things like that. It really depends on what part of the country you're in and what the airport is, and to what degree the airport spends money to do that. So there are bird strikes still pretty regularly. We just don't hear about them. Most of the time, it's pretty minimal damage, especially if it's on departure with a large aircraft. A lot of times the bird hits the aircraft, not the window or things like that. So. And then the other applications, as I mentioned: security, surveillance, the package delivery. Now the challenges. The biggest one is our air traffic management system. We've all heard about that as of late. There are a lot of challenges with our air traffic management system that they're working diligently. I've been actually to some meetings about it. We're actually having our safety day at the end of October over at the Airbus Experience Center downtown. And we're having 3 people from the FAA that are going to come talk about what's going on with that. One that's specific, he oversees that. The Deputy Administrator, Chris Rocheleau, is going to be there. And NTSB, one of their board members, is coming to talk about the safety side of things. So, but the air traffic management, the infrastructure of being able to address our regular needs with commercial and business aviation traffic, and now interspersing that with drones. By the way, we're launching rockets into space every other day now in multiple locations, Florida, Houston, Texas, etc. And they're building more launch pads in other places. So making all of that work in harmony is a huge, huge challenge that the biggest fix for it is upgrading our system. Now, you guys may know or may not know, we have been upgrading next generation in air traffic control for almost 30 years. It ain't next generation anymore when it takes that long. Literally, I came here almost 20 years ago. It's getting close to 20 years. And they had already been in the process of implementing next gen for a number of years. So to think that there has been minimal progress in that is a little disturbing. But it's going to be a real problem because now the drones are being used a lot, not only by people who have to keep them below 400 feet personally, but professional use, commercial, for surveying and things like that. So the big hurdle is going to be making that all work and getting the FAA to do what it needs to do to make it safe.
Is there a new next gen? I know we're talking about the next gen program. They're going to use satellites instead of radar. They can fly closer together and all that sort of stuff.
Well, so the next gen we have is ADS-B. But in terms of on the air traffic control side, their systems can be and need to be updated with the absolute latest. And it needs to be done in a fairly succinct manner, like within a year or two, not over a period of years. They just put out a notice about a week ago announcing that they're putting out their offering for RFPs for proposals from companies to see who can do it and provide the most efficient one, the most effective one, and who can do it the quickest. And they're dealing with that right now, the Transportation Secretary.
But so the big next gen move was to switch to satellites. So what's the next one? Is it to satellites, but also then to talk to each other with the drones, or like what's the next big iteration?
Okay, so we have all of that in the airplanes, and in some towers, in some radar facilities. We don't have it in all of them. And so in terms of what I think you're asking is, our need is on the air traffic control side, because the airplanes are already there with everything that they need. Mm-hmm. And in terms of communications and being able to show where they are accurately and things like that.
So it's integrating everything else into the same space and system.
It's also making sure that general aviation and business aviation and commercial aviation all have the same equipment and can talk to each other. So it's a huge burden on a general aviation aircraft to equip. Mm-hmm. It's the same as a commercial airline.
Right, but
so
I guess
there's all those issues as well.
Right, so this is a question of the technology, but this was the technology where the goal was from, like you said, 20 years ago to spread it. So you're saying it hasn't percolated throughout the industry yet. I guess I'm just asking, is there a new version 3 that's going to come out that then also has to percolate, or we're now good enough that once everyone has this, there's no marginal benefit to changing anything?
There'll be the latest version of it. I don't know the specifics about that. I'm going to learn in about a month. But there's a new latest technology version. It'll be as I mentioned, it's the speed of installation. They need to put I think they're going to phase it where they're going to do all the major towers and radar facilities first, the centers and things like that, and get them up to speed first, and then they'll put it in the rest of them.
And once they do that, is it just software updates every so often, or are they going to have to keep changing the hardware on every single device every 5 years?
The newer technology is software updates. That I do know.
Okay.
I do know. This gentleman brings up a really good point, though. There is a challenge so the commercial, they'll do what they need to do. They'll spend the money. And pretty much the same in business aviation. The rest of the general aviation market, the guys that are members of AOPA, that fly on the weekends and all that kind of stuff, they're a little more challenged with it because it is an expense. Now, the expenses come down considerably from when ADS-B was first required versus now, but it's still an additional expense to your flying to have to install that in the aircraft. And we're reaching the point of where it's going to be mandatory. I think we are almost there. That's going to be mandatory to have it. So whether you want to pay for it or not, you're going to have to put it in.
Yeah,
The only exception to that is if you fly out in the country somewhere and you never bring your plane into
It's like the RFID on
Class B
drones.
system.
It was recommended, but now as the visual line of sight becomes more into the regulatory system,
Yeah, because
you're
it
going to have
impacts the commercial airliners
Exactly.
and business jets that are equipped that way.
Yep. Yeah, you're going to have to do
it. does.
So it dumbs it down to the lowest common denominator, which
Mhm.
defeats the whole purpose of the advanced technology in the airspace.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a proliferation of technology down to the lowest level because of accessibility, because of how you can use your phone to. As a commercial drone pilot, you can use your phone to request NOTAM clearance on your flight path.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it makes sense.
Using
to,
ForeFlight or whatever, you can just knock it out. But it's a huge challenge, but it has to be addressed. Our system is growing, not our system. Everything else is growing. The number of aircraft, the number of flights, et cetera, and so forth. But our system isn't able to handle that, which is why they're doing things like either a ground stop or if they have a tower or facility that's down in personnel, then they literally close it for a few hours and think, well, you can't do that with some of these major airports. You can't tell them, hey, you guys are gonna have to hold off flying for a little bit because we don't have enough people to monitor and control your airspace. So, technical limitations are basically what the limitations are of a drone in terms of how long it can fly, battery life wise, and things like that. That's a constantly evolving. The battery lives are getting longer and longer. The smaller batteries that you can extend. The vulnerability of cyber. I think this is a big one for all aspects of UAS and drones, because somebody hacking in can wreak havoc on it. So I think that's one of the ones that there's going to be a lot of focus on to try to avoid that from happening. I don't know if you guys have heard, but there have been issues like GPS interference going into Teterboro and stuff like that from somebody that has a unit somewhere nearby and scrambles it or whatever just to try to mess the pilots up. Fortunately, those bigger and more sophisticated business aircraft that go into Teterboro, they have double and triple redundancy, so they can match up and make sure if they lose it on this part, they can say, okay, we're still good here, and that type of thing. So, really it works.
You got a heavy thumb.
Yeah, I guess I do. Let me go. Where did it go? Let me go back into the play from current. Yeah. Oh, we got time. Okay, let me move this along a little bit. So the other robotics that's come into play more and more, you're going to see it more and more at airports. It's already being used at some. Our robotics for, and this is moving into the robotics area, for robotics for working on aircraft, for moving cargo around, for, if you can imagine, you walk up to a robot and deal with your flight. Maybe I needed that in those situations I was in. And I don't know what a robot does for the police. I haven't figured that one out yet, but they're doing that kind of thing. I don't have a lot on robotics, and I'll tell you why. It's what I wrote up here. AI, robotics, drones, and advanced air mobility are all kind of interconnected. because they're all using the same technology or similar technology, and they're all kind of trying to do the same thing, to make things more efficient, et cetera. So, as I said there, they all contribute to safety and efficiency. Robotics has one thing that I'm not trying to see. I don't want to see a robot sitting in a co-pilot seat with me. Not quite ready for that. Autonomous flight systems. I have this belief, and I could eat my words at some point. Hopefully, maybe I won't even be here. But the idea of a plane with passengers with nobody in the cockpit, not accepting that yet. They're working on it, but I think you got to have somebody there just in case something goes awry, and you can have it. Goes back to the whole thing about the human factor and somebody being able to make a reasonable decision or fix something or bypass something like in movies to deal with that. Aircraft inspection, manufacturing, and assembly, all of those things come into play with robotics. We already kind of know that. I think, the heavy lifting of dealing with certain aspects of assembly or manufacturing that are dangerous for a person to do, they can do it. And I'll just mention, in precision and consistency, I will mention that robotics are going to be used quite a bit on the moon and Mars. They're already designing systems. They're going to use them to build like the base of an infrastructure that can then be continued when the astronauts get there. But robots don't need any air, so they can work forever. Let me share this.
Joby. Yeah, Joby spoke last year.
Advanced air mobility, air taxi. This is a test flight.
What's the capacity?
4. Pilot and 4 passengers in the back. This one and Archer Aviation are the ones that are making the most progress. That is coming sooner than we think. There's Archers. There's a little different design, a little bigger, but they're actually, I think they and Joby are going to start carrying passengers in Dubai next year. Little tougher on the regulations here to get them active here in the States, but they're working on it. Trust me on that one. And that's Joby.
Well, what's the range on those things? So, for example, if you're going from DC to New York or wherever.
You don't take it to DC.
Right.
No.
Yeah. So to answer your question, first of all, 100 to 150 miles.
So Baltimore would make sense.
Baltimore would make sense. So yeah, you can go to Baltimore, but anything beyond that, they're not designed. They're designed to be a taxi in the air. So they're designed for short distances. So to go from one side of an area to another, to go from the district out somewhere here in Loudoun County, or things like that, or as you said, to Baltimore. But anything beyond that, then you'll want to take another means.
So what is the price point for a passenger to go like from here in Loudoun into DC?
That hasn't been determined yet, but Uber is, as I like to say, all up in this, and they want to have a friendly price point. So it's going to be interesting to see how that factors in. I don't know.
I've heard it was probably somewhere between $200 and $300.
Well, you might as well take a helicopter.
One way, but for a person who is an executive and they're looking to avoid traffic, going to Baltimore every day.
Especially today.
Exactly.
Or yesterday.
Exactly.
They may pay, and that's the intent is for it to be,
So where can they?
yeah, you're paying for convenience. Of course.
That's what I'm getting ready to talk about. You're going to ask, where can you get one?
Yeah.
Where can you get on one?
Well,
So the first thing that's very evident. So as I mentioned, Uber, Lyft style of transportation, piloted versus autonomous. Right now they're going to go with piloted. That's the faster way to get it through
In the air.
through Congress and through the FAA. Infrastructure is a big piece of this, which I'll talk about in a second. And just real quickly, the types of aircraft. As you can see, both of those multi-rotor, what they call lift and cruise, tilt rotor, which is how they can do lift and cruise, and then they get all fancy with stuff like vector thrust and propulsion distribution. So here's the answer to your question, research and development. Let me come back to that in a minute. Let me go to answer your question on the infrastructure. So the easiest way to start this is with FBOs at airports, because they already have infrastructure for transportation, air transportation, and now what you're doing is accommodating these advanced air mobility or these eVTOLs. And the FBOs, so Atlantic Aviation and Signature Aviation are all over this. They're the first two that want to be the source for that. You need the ability to charge them and to do fast charging at that, so you can keep them moving. You need a place for them on the ramp, so you got to designate an area. You need to be able to process passengers in and out. Again, the FBOs have that ability. And all of these things come into play in order for it to work. And then separately, they're starting to build vertiports. That's a separate operation. The vertiport is owned by somebody, picks a piece of land. I think one of the first vertiports was in Chicago, not far from the Loop. And they were ahead of their time because they're kind of been on hold for a minute, but their idea was there, which was to have a terminal. I don't know about charging stations, but they had multiple landing pads, like 6 or 8 of them. More so for helicopters, but kind of the same thing. But those are going to be the two things. Now, my prediction is the next thing that's going to happen is somebody that has a large piece of land, like a Walmart or somebody like that, is going to say, I'll give you a corner of our parking lot, for X amount of deal, put a pad there, put a charging station there or whatever, not so much a charging station, but put a pad there, and it's going to open up a lot of other areas that these eVTOLs can go to.
Logan, you listening, Logan?
Yeah, this is part of your world.
Yeah.
But it is, it's coming. I think once over here we see the success of it in places like Dubai. Japan's all over too, by the way. Japan's already starting to build vertiports. They're doing an incentive. I think they pay for 50% of the vertiport. So they're accelerating it too. China, of course, is always over. They're going to wait and steal all of our technology. Oh, did I say that?
So Vincent, even with these, I mean, how somebody thinking through how well. Let me back up. So one of the value propositions of this is it'd be very useful, I think, in urban areas to avoid ground-based traffic.
Yes, exactly.
So how do you integrate these things in a controlled airspace? Because when you think about big urban centers, there's 3 airports here in DC, all the airports up in the New York area. How do you integrate these guys into the airspace, or do you think they'll designate certain corridors for air taxis?
That's a great question. It's air traffic management's.
Yeah, it's going back to what you were saying before, even with drones.
Yeah, they're going to have to figure that out and make that happen. And you're right, in congested urban areas like DC, New York, Chicago, etc., that is going to be a challenge. If you can imagine, you got aircraft coming in over Lake Michigan in 2 streams on parallel runways landing. You got drones into O'Hare. You got drones flying around. You got helicopters flying, because helicopters are still here. They're still in the picture. And now you want to add eVTOLs in there. So it's going to be a very complex system. And then, in California and Florida and Texas, throw in some rocket launches on a regular basis. I never thought I'd live to see the day that a rocket launch was like seeing an airplane take off. It's like, oh, another rocket. That's nice.
Going back to Logan's point, it is so complex. That's why it takes so long. Mm-hmm. And then the technology gets obsolete before they get
it in. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I just went through the R&D of this, how they've come up with these. It's pretty much the same as the way they came up with everything that flies. Prototype simulations, wind tunnel testing, ground trials, in this case, testing batteries, motors, and avionics, flight test phase, low-level hovering and complex maneuvering, stress testing, electric motors, and converters from overheating, vibration, and corrosion, which I thought was interesting, and then certification. So moving forward to this, challenges, charging stations, fast charging capability, battery technology, which continues to change and improve, efficient energy management, and then takeoff and landing locations, passenger terminals, maintenance facilities. Maintenance is another aspect of this.
A lot of job opportunities.
Yep, ton of job opportunities, wide open, and these young kids and their design minds and everything, they ought to be able to, really do something with it. The two real big positive things about eVTOLs, they're quiet and they're zero emissions because they're electric. So they really do contribute to the environment from that standpoint. And that's kind of the latest that I have to share about this.
Wow, that's awesome.
Any questions? Any more questions?
So how often do you fly?
Not as often as I'd like. I'm more commercial than I do private. I try to get up every couple of weeks. Because if I can't fly that frequently, then I lay off of it. Because I like to have the consistency for safety.
So what kind of aircraft do you have?
I just put 3 kids through college, grad school. I got one that's going to law school. So, next question, please. I haven't owned an airplane in years. Kids are a priority right now.
Jazz Flying Club?
I'm actually thinking about joining one. I've been just flying. I have friends that have planes, so I fly with them sometimes, or I'll rent. But I actually am thinking of joining. I have a friend that told me about one flying club. He flies out of this is too far. He's out of Leesburg.
There's a club already. It must be Leesburg.
Yeah, there's a club in Leesburg. There's a friend that he flies out of Manassas. That's too far too. I live right near Montgomery Airport, and fortunately, I have 2 friends that fly out of there. One in Mooney and one in Sears. So I get my time in with that.
Do your daughters fly? Have they taken pilot lessons?
No. No, I even took my daughter, my youngest daughter, when she went to school down in Florida at Stetson. I tried to get her to take a look at Embry-Riddle, and she only liked the boys over there. That was the only thing she was interested in. She's like, oh, well, they have some cute boys over there. I'm talking about the school, the academics. But no, no interest. They all say they want to get their private one day. They enjoy the privilege of being a passenger, sitting in the back, playing their video games, talking to each other, sleeping. Never had any desire. My youngest is a natural stick, though. When I put her up in the co-pilot and let her take the plane, I was like, you're really good at this. She goes, yeah, I know that one day. That's about all I get. Any questions about anything I may have left out?
I'm
Yes.
curious that so many high-rise buildings and hospitals have emergency helicopter spaces.
Medevac. Yes.
So can they share?
Oh, she
With
just brought
this?
up another
What?
What's that? Can they share the airspace?
Well, can they share those landing locations?
Oh, yeah. So, things like our Maryland State Troopers medevac program, they'll land on a highway or whatever. They'll land wherever they need. As long as they're clear of trees and wires, they can put her down. Of course they would. Not only would they share, they probably would get priority. But that's you just added another one to the plate that has to be figured out, because there is a lot of transportation. Now, the challenge here in D.C. is we have the freeze zone around in the D.C. area, and so that in itself presents some challenges. As a matter of fact, we have a heliport in South Capitol. It's actually close to MGM over there by National. But it's not used the way I think they would like to, and it could be because of all the security. So there's this there's some real challenges in DC in particular. Now, Virginia, things can be done. Maryland, things can be done. But unfortunately, a lot of our business traffic is DC itself. So, because for example, Pfizer has a flight department up in the Philadelphia area, and they have helicopters and jets, and they would like to fly their helicopter down here directly instead of one of those big 650s or whatever, or 600, I forget what they have now, Gulfstreams. But because of the security issues, they can't. So, they fly to like Boston and stuff in New York all the time, but they can't fly down here easily. It's a major hassle. So, I don't know if you guys know that we still have the armed security, the ASO, armed security officer requirement to fly into DCA. So you can't fly into DCA without an armed security officer on board.
Really?
So you have to have permission ahead of time, and you have to have an ASO in order to do that, to fly in and out of there. Well, that's a hassle in a lot of different ways. President of NBAA a couple of years ago, he flew on a Cirrus SR-22 into DC. I don't know why he had to do that, but he did. And he had to have an ASO on board. If you can imagine, you and the pilot, and then in the back you got a security officer in a plane that holds 4 people. But it's the reality.
Is that just for Reagan, or is it?
It's for Reagan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not regarding. So I said all that to say that people actually fly into Dulles, Leesburg, Manassas, or anywhere else just to not deal with that. And of course, it defeats the purpose, because if you can fly into, and don't get me wrong, Signature does fine at Reagan. They keep pretty busy. If you can fly into Reagan, that's great, because it only takes you 10 or 15 minutes to get on the business side of things.
Can you get yourself certified as an ASO?
What, as an ASO? And you asked some really interesting questions. I don't know. No, I don't know. That's a good question, but I don't think you can. There's got to be a catch with it. I don't really think you can. I just know you have to have it. The other thing I was going to say about ASO is people don't like to have them on board, because a lot of these executives are meeting or on their phone talking very sensitive topics and stuff like that. They don't want anybody else to hear about it. So they only like the pilots to hear about it. So that's the other problem.
Well, how can they do taxis from like Dulles to Reagan and not have one of those ASOs?
Well, thank you. That's another problem.
Ask
the FAA.
Probably didn't land at Reagan. There's no room.
That's the FAA. Yeah, we have all of the stuff. Our industry is really jumping right now. So there's so much growth and so much happening, but we're having that busting through the seams problem, and we're not able to. It's kind of like if you build a bunch of apartments or condos or homes or all a combination of all in a neighborhood, and then all of a sudden you're short on police, and all of a sudden the line to Starbucks went from 5 people to 50. That's the problem we're having in aviation.
On the roads.
Yeah.
So who's
And on the roads, exactly.
Who's taking the lead to overcome some of these problems?
That's a good question. So the answer to that question is these are our associations. So NBAA, AOPA, NATA, all the aviation alphabet groups, they're all over it. They're standing on desks down there on the Hill, and they're constantly putting out things about this stuff so that we can keep it alive and deal with it. I mentioned I sit on the board of GWBAA, the Greater Washington Business Aviation Association. We do our part from a regional standpoint to support their efforts, by telling our members, write in, call in, this and that and the other. So the association, that's their whole purpose. I mean, their purpose is to do things for members too, but the big purpose is to advocate for the industry. And we've got a lot of advocating to do right about now. I am happy to say, because last year, you guys have heard of the FAA reauthorization bill. Mm-hmm. So it's a 5-year budget, but for whatever reason, we have had to, every year or so, vote on it again. Now, last year they had a bipartisan passing of that bill, and so the money is there to do a lot of the things that we're talking about in terms of improving the infrastructure and stuff like that. It's a matter of implementation and being on the same page about that and making that happen. You guys know we've had like 5 heads of the FAA over the last 6 or 7 years, including 2 interims. So just when we think we had somebody in there, then things change. I'm hoping that with the current administration, in terms of the current head of the FAA, Brandon, I think his name is, and then Chris is his lieutenant. Chris is a great guy. He's been with the FAA a long time. Between them and, I don't want to sound political, but to my surprise, Sean Duffy has been very proactive with trying to get things right in terms of the upgrades that we need, technologically speaking, and all of that. So it right now looks very favorable that we're going to get some of the things we need. The only challenge is incorporating all of the other stuff once we do make that happen. And all this stuff has got to happen in the next couple, 2, at the most 3 years. We have 4 more years left on the current FAA reauthorization bill. So if we can get all of the stuff done before they have to vote on money again, it'd be great.
And that, by the way, has been historically, going back years and decades. One of the biggest challenges for FAA is having predictable funding. I mean, how can you do a multi-year capital investment program without knowing what your funding is going to be?
Precisely. That's exactly right. You can't. And you do that over and over and over, and things get pushed back and pushed back and pushed back.
And all the starts and stops and starts and stops.
One closing thing I wanted to say on hold that thought, please. One closing thing I wanted to say on technology, though, is one thing that's been out. There's 2 things that have been out there that one I don't really think is fair, and the other one more people need to know about it. The one I don't think is fair is saying that we still have paper stuff in the towers.
Flight strips.
The strips. We do. In Podunk Tower out in Booney somewhere, we don't have those in any of our major towers. So that's just kind of an exaggeration. The other thing is, one of the things that we are doing.
And by the way, the air traffic controllers wanted those.
The strips.
Yeah, or electronic version of
it.
Just from their perspective, human factors, and gave them better situational awareness of the aircraft that they're responsible for.
True. Absolutely true. The other thing is that, as you may or may not know, there's only one school in the country where you can train to be an air traffic controller. It's in Oklahoma City. That school can only put through 100 people at a time. They have a washout rate right now of 40%. Jesus. So only 60 graduate. The 60, based on what rank you graduated at, or whether you were first in your class or 10th in your class or whatever, determines what facility you'll get assigned to. The ones that get assigned to Timbuktu, way out nowhere, there's another really bad word I could use for it. Most of them quit while they're on, because on-the-job training for an air traffic controller can take up to 2 years. So look at this problem that you have, and then I'm going to tell you one of the solutions. You have a high washout rate at the academy. You have a fairly bad washout rate in on-the-job training, and you have burnout senior controllers who are done. And when they retire or whatever, they don't want to come back and be an instructor. They just don't want to have anything to do with it anymore, which is a shame, because they're the ones who've been doing it for 10, 20, 30 years and, could be very helpful for bringing in the next generation of controllers. The good news, if there's such a thing with this, is that there's a thing called College Training Initiative, CTI. CTI means that if you're a school that has a 2-year air traffic control program as part of your curriculum, college, university, or whatever, and you get what's called the enhanced CTI, certification from the FAA. When a person finishes their 2-year degree or certification as an air traffic controller, they can go to a tower or radar facility and start doing on-the-job training. They do not have to go to Oklahoma City. There are 150 plus colleges around the country that teach air traffic control. Right now, I think we're at 8 in terms of enhanced CTI, meaning that when they finish the program, they can go to a tower or a radar facility. That is a huge step, because even though the difference is when you go to the academy, you get paid. When you go to school, you got to figure out how to pay for it. But it still opens up the gates in terms of more opportunities for people. One of the points that was made to me, and I hadn't even thought about it, sometimes people want to do something, but during their training, they have a family or other obligations, and they can't afford to leave and go somewhere for 6 months or whatever the case may be, which is what it would be to go to Oklahoma City. So if they can go to a school in their area, like Vaughn College that I was at the other day, get their training from there, and then after they get their certification, get their assignment, it makes it more doable.
So since it's 2 years, can you use it in a community college?
Yes, I was including community college, I'm sorry. That's why I said colleges and university. Yes, absolutely. So Baltimore, or whatever they call it, they have a weird name. Baltimore Central Community, something. Baltimore Community College. They have air traffic. I know a young lady that finished it a couple of years ago and is waiting. She's now on the short list to go to Oklahoma City. In her case, she has to go to Oklahoma City because it wasn't enhanced CTI. You have to have the enhanced in order for you to be able to go directly to it.
Is there a washout rate for the ones that are going to the college?
Probably not much at all, because they're paying for it. Think about it.
Yeah,
If somebody paying you and you don't like it, then you quit, right? But if you're paying for it, you don't want to wash yourself out, I think.
So we know if Northern Virginia Community College has a program.
I don't know. Good question. I don't know the list of schools. That's a good question, though. The guy that's in charge is the vice president of it for the FAA. I should ask him for his latest list and see. But yeah, if they have an air traffic control program, they may be trying to get the enhanced certification.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I know.
I'm sorry.
And anybody else have any questions?
We are over.
Oh, I had one.
Quick.
So is there an association being developed that's for drones and unmanned?
Yeah, there is, and I don't know the name of it off the top of my
We'll have to
head.
find that out.
Yeah, it's a very good question.
On behalf of our committee, we're so grateful to have you here, and it's
My pleasure.
what we like to do to say thank you is to invite you to a luncheon, and the one that we'd like to invite you to is with Richard Goldenowski as the speaker.
Okay.
And I believe that's the next luncheon in December, correct?
I want to say December 11th.
Yes, because what happens in November is we have our big gala at the new JW Marriott in Ruston, but we would love to have you, if you will come as our guest. And I'd like to have everyone give Vincent a big round of applause.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure. Yeah. A lot of great questions. I'm glad I could answer them. So.
The one thing I don't think we did ask you is, what do you spend most of your time doing?
I'm a consultant. I have a handful of clients who I do things for. So I do two things. I do media and public relations consulting for about 3 clients, and I do workforce consulting for companies that are trying to figure out what I told you at the beginning, which is what kind of programming or programs can they do to fill the pipeline. Mine is more focused on the long term, because it's about the high schooler or even somebody that just started college, and directing them in terms of getting into this industry. Real quick, I'll just say, for example, Airbus has a manufacturing facility in Alabama, and they have a program where they take a high school senior, they teach them the basics of assembly stuff. And when they graduate, if they're not bound for a 2-year or a 4-year or a trade school, they learn enough during that time that they can go and start working at the factory for a factory salary. And I think that it's great because one of the things that's really important about that is not everybody's college bound, but you have kids that have skills.
What organization does this for kids?
They're called FlightWorks Alabama. They're tied into Airbus. FlightWorks Alabama. And FlightWorks, that's what they do. They take the seniors, they train them, and by the time they graduate, they step right into a job with pretty good pay. I mean, they're assembly pay for at a manufacturing facility. So I think more that was the other thing I was going to mention is that at the conferences or summits that I went to, when they were talking about workforce, that was brought up too, that they need, I'll simplify it. I talked to a young lady from Pittsburgh Institute of Aeronautics on one of my shows a couple of years ago. A couple of weeks later, she sent me an email. She had just graduated from the program, had just gotten her certification from the FAA to be an A&P. She got hired by SpaceX. Because if you think about it, yeah, they need rocket scientists and engineers, but somebody's got to put together and take apart those rockets. And that's what she's doing now. So she stepped out of there into a really good gig, because I'm sure she's getting paid very well.
So people that are like in the Navy or the Air Force where they do those jobs, can't they fill some of the spots that are needed?
They can, but the military has their own challenges. They're trying to keep people. And the other thing is, people don't realize transitioning from military to civilian is not as easy as you think. The regimen of military is much different than the civilian side of things, and the transition to get a job in the civilian world after being in the military for so long, it's such a challenge that, for example, NBAA is having at the convention coming up next month. It is next month tomorrow in Vegas. They're actually having a session on going from the military to the civilian world, and actually